So far we have looked at the trade unit of the Empire course through a series of case studies. Those case studies have been, firstly, mercantilism and free trade. Secondly, we looked at the case for the abolition of slavery. Thirdly, we looked at the establishment and changing role of the East India Company. And finally, we looked at the issue of the Opium War in China. The final stage of this course, the final case studies, the changing importance of ports, entrepots and trade routes within the UK and throughout the Empire, will be dealt with through a series of case studies that you will research and present to the class. Developments in trade. Britain's evolution from mercantilism to free trade, and latterly towards protectionism, as illustrated in the diagram of thirds at the bottom of this page, was not a sudden one, but an evolutionary process over time, reflecting both her changing circumstances and other factors that you have had to consider so far. These range from Britain's experience of losing the 13 colonies, which we have briefly touched upon, but we will study later in greater depth. Secondly, Britain's experience in becoming the world's first industrialised nation, an industrial revolution giving Britain a competitive edge and therefore the chance to break away from established trade patterns. Thirdly, the ideas of Adam Smith and his book The Wealth of Nations, bringing enlightenment and scientific thinking to the study of economics. Fourthly, the growth of the middle class, initially exercising great wealth without representation. The struggle of the middle class to gain a vote and its lobbying of Parliament would prove to be an influence on the move from mercantilism with its glass ceilings to the more aspirational and social climbing strategies more closely associated with free trade. With slavery, we certainly saw the strategic dimension to the movement from mercantilism to free trade. If slavery was the foundation of mercantilism, then ending that slavery would enable Britain possibly to gain an advantage in a war and then trade with a world after the war that she could dominate because of her industrial revolution. Profitability, simply money. And finally, was there a moral imperative for the move from mercantilism to free trade and latterly towards protectionism? The ends throughout this course were always profit, but the means was always going to be pragmatic. When mercantilism failed to deliver the ends, pragmatism enabled Britain to exploit her circumstances and embrace free trade. This would remain the case for the rest of the 19th century until the world became far more capable of competing with the British towards the last quarter of the 19th century. In your project, you will deal with the last case studies that need to be studied for this particular unit. These are the acquisitions of 6 locations around the world. As you can see from their dates, they range from the start of the free trade period with the acquisition of Singapore through to the acquisition of Weihai in 1898. The acquisitions in between are Hong Kong in 1842, which we already know is linked to the Opium Wars, the opening up of Shanghai to trade in 1842, again another consequence of the opening of China after the Opium Wars, the purchase of the Suez Canal in 1875, which is a key date in our study of the course, as it is from this date that we start to see the shift towards protectionism, the acquisition of Zanzibar in 1890, and then the lease of Weihai again in 1898. Your teacher, prior to starting the project, will go through a general overview of each of these locations, linking it to your prior learning, understanding you already have from the course, and ensuring, of course, that you have a geographical understanding of the locations. In order to complete your presentation, you will have access to the following materials and the following expectations. You will have access to the core textbook, which has been approved by the exam board, so all the key information is in there. However, you will be expected to include information from at least 4 additional texts or websites. Your revision guide might be an interesting place to start for this. Ideally, you should integrate video, or if you're unable to find video, maybe create your own. Thirdly, complete a mind map that has been presented for you that will be shown later on in this presentation. There will also be follow-up activities, starting to look at the causes for motives for the British Empire that we initially looked at in our overview, and also addressing the question of whether the British Empire was acquired in a fit of absence of mind, which is the original quote we started this course with Sir John Seeley. You will then be asked to write an essay introduction about the significance of the location that you have studied, and finally write a quiz that we can use to test the understanding of both yourself and your fellow students. This is an illustration of the mind map that you will be asked to complete. On the sheet you will have all the key factors that we have looked at across the teaching of the unit on trade. In the middle you will have your location. Now, depending on where your project fits on this course, some or all of these will be relevant. If they are irrelevant, you may delete them. If there are other factors that we haven't considered, you may include them. Your job on this particular task is to link the factors through explanation. An example is provided here on the right. For ease, your teacher may well ask you to video your explanation of your diagram in order that it be available readily for other people to see. The theories of empire was one of our initial overview activities. We've already identified the significance of money as a drive for the British to acquire an empire, and we've already considered the quote of Sir John Seeley. You'll now revisit them at the end of this course. It may be possible that your ideas haven't changed, but what I'll expect you to do on this particular task is to explore the hierarchy of your preferences. 3 options for how you can present your work are illustrated here. At the end of the PowerPoint in each of the files that are set up for you on the shared area, you will also see that there is the outline for a quiz that you can write. This is based upon a format that was written for your Year 12 course. See, what you're provided with is a set of different activities that you find for your particular course. Like a variety of these tasks to be included. All of the materials required for this activity can be found on the shared area.